Hey, good morning and welcome to Breakthrough Walls. I'm Ken Walls and I'm your host. And we have a really cool guest on today, Manuel Astruc. I hope I said his name right. Anyway, I'm going to bring Manuel on here in just a second. So stay with us. And we're back. Let's bring Manuel on. Manuel, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. I am so glad to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. Are you looking for the Facebook thing to
I
share?
was almost there. You want
Well,
me to
go ahead.
go ahead and share it.
Yeah, we can wait. We want to make sure all your friends and family know that you're on here. So let's share this thing out. And anybody watching right now, feel free to press the share button. Share this thing out. So, Manuel, I started this show about almost 3 years ago now. And I started it to give back to the world and help people get unstuck in life. And 2020 proved to be an interesting year for a lot of people to get stuck. And so I'm excited to hear your story. And if you're struggling with finding it, don't even worry about it. You can share it later too.
I'll share it later. Yeah.
Yeah. So Scott Ricard is on and Darlene. We have some wonderful people joining us. So Manuel, why don't you start with telling everybody where you were born and raised?
Pamplona, Spain.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think you're my first guest from Spain.
Wow.
In 330 some odd interviews. Wow. That's pretty cool. So is that where you were raised?
For 5 years, my family, my parents were Spanish. They were born and raised in Spain. The first 5 years of my life, I lived in Pamplona, which is where they do the running of the bulls. It's up in the northern part by France.
Okay.
Yeah. And my father was a MD PhD. He
wow.
And he was mainly doing at that point, when I was young, doing research with the brain and studying brains in monkeys. And the grant opportunities and the research opportunities were much greater in the United States. He had done a sabbatical in Walter Reed Hospital shortly after I was born. And then he was looking for a chance to come back. And then a position opened up in Richmond, Virginia. When I was 5, he was hired, and the family, so my father, my mom, and there were 5 siblings. My twin sister and I were the oldest, and 3 others, came over to Richmond. And
wow.
That's where I grew up. Yeah.
Richmond, Virginia.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a nice town, actually. I've been there.
Yeah. Nice place to grow up.
Yeah. So your father was an MD and a PhD, a bit of an overachiever.
Sort of. The reality is that back then, as he tells the story, as he used to tell the story, he has passed away. But when you got your MD back in those days in Spain, before you could get a job, you basically had to wait for someone to like die and pass on their practice over to you. It was just hard to get, traction with just the MD. And he was always very interested in the research aspect of things. So his thought was that he would do the research. It was a much quicker way to get a job, and he wanted to get married and have a family. So needed to provide for the family.
Wow. So he came over here, and you were 5 when you came to the United States, you said.
Exactly.
And so what was the purpose of coming to Richmond?
So my father had gotten the position at the Medical College of Virginia to do research there and to teach, and all the things that go
Yeah.
along with that.
What was it like for you coming to America? I mean, was English a second language for you yet, or?
Yeah, so there was no English. We started
Wow.
um, in kindergarten. So my twin sister and I were taken into a small Catholic school, and we'd obviously been together for 5 years.
Yeah.
And we went into the school, and I remember being just so nervous. I didn't know any English. I, didn't know what to expect, but at least my sister was with me. And the first thing that happened as we walked into the school is they took my sister in one direction and they took me in another direction. I was totally not expecting that. It like freaked me out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would at 5 years old.
yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow. So you started off in America feeling insecure, rightfully so. So where did things go from there? I mean, what was it like for you growing up in Richmond as an immigrant to America? What was that like?
I don't remember it as being there were certainly the first year I have memories of um, awkwardness in the kindergarten class, and
Yeah.
my sister and I would find each other at recess and in the playground. But pretty quickly we had um, acclimated. We learned the English, and the challenge initially when we were growing up is my parents wanted us to learn English. So inside the family, we would be encouraged to speak English. Then over the years, that changed, and we were encouraged to come back and like speak our native tongue, like, so that we wouldn't lose Spanish. Over the years, we really started speaking more and more English around the house, except with my mother. She was the one that the entire family spoke Spanish to for as long as she was alive.
Wow. So you still speak Spanish, I'm assuming.
A little bit, yeah. So
Just a little?
I can get around in Spanish. I can get around in Spanish.
Wow. Well, that's better than me. So you and I took 2 years of Spanish in high school, and I the only thing I remember is there's no word for Ken in Spanish, so I had to pick you had to pick a Spanish name, so
Right.
I picked Jose. I don't even know why, but so you grew up and you ended up graduating high school in Richmond, is that correct?
Exactly.
And then you went on to college.
And so the family was very much indoctrinated with the idea that we had to go to college, be professionals, and it was by default. There wasn't a lot of discussion around, the various career paths that someone could potentially take.
Yeah.
I was good at math. I was good at school. I was good in science, and people would say you'd make a good doctor, and I was sign me up. Like by default, it seemed like a reasonable idea, and you could check a box and not have to think too much further. What are you going to do? I'm going to go to college. I'm going to go pre-med, and I'll do med school and become a doctor.
And did you?
And I did. So
an MD?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
I see. I thought I knew everything about you. I did not know that. So did you go on to practice medicine then?
Oh no, yeah. So I still practice medicine. So the trajectory then is you do 4 years of college, you do 4 years of med school. At the end of that, you have an MD, but like no practical skills to do anything else really. So then you specialize. You do a specialty in something, pediatrics, surgery, and it's interesting. For me, I ended up deciding to go into psychiatry. And it was not what I would have guessed I would have gone into it. It was nowhere really on my radar. But I discovered that there were a couple of things. Number one is that I really like to hang out with people and get to know them. In the days that I was in med school, we would have rotations in the hospital, and when the work was done, we had done everything that had been asked of us in terms of taking care of patients and ordering blood work and getting information and studying and whatnot. um, I like to find patients who didn't have family members visiting. They were lonely, and I would sit with them and I would like ask them, like, where are you from? What'd you do? Like, just what you're doing now. um,
Yeah.
and it was endlessly interesting and fascinating. And I loved the behavioral sciences, the psychiatry rotation that I did was like second to none. It was just a great experience. The hard part of the mindset shift that I had to make was I went into medicine with an assumption that I would be doing something that would be like, life saving. There would be life saving procedures. We would thump on chests. We would give, intravenous medications to save someone's life in the emergency room.
Yeah.
And when um, I went into psychiatry, there was a little bit of a loss of that. But the reality is, after years now of working in psychiatry, um, I don't believe it to be true at all that we don't do life-saving work, and it's part of my mission. Actually, it's, one of the reasons that I'm doing interviews and podcasts is really because I have a passion for getting the word out about mental health and trauma and addiction. Um, like I want to elevate that conversation. I want to decrease the stigma, and I want to get a message out to the world. There's hope. You're not alone, and change is possible. So those three things, if we embed that in people's heads, it
Yeah.
can save your life. And if someone's struggling around you, those are three easy things to remember to help someone out and to offer support and guidance.
I've been I'm known as the king of live streaming. I've done over 3,000 live streams, and I'll never forget when in 2014 when I started. I one night I just decided to be transparent on a live stream and tell everybody that I was in recovery. And it actually turned into one of my most popular live streams. Like, it got so many viewers, and I remember thinking, well, wait a minute, I don't have anything to hide. Why wouldn't I? And I've had so many people reach out as a result and say, hey, I've struggled with alcohol too, and you've encouraged me to, seek help. And I think that it's a beautiful thing to put the message out there. I've been judged, but they're going to judge me anyway. So, right. So I love the fact that you want to get that message out there, because I think it's incredibly important that people know that hope is available,
Yeah.
that there is hope.
And one of the things, so this is where I'll take off my Dr. Astruc hat. Like, I'll just take that off. I'm going to put on my coaching hat, because that's my second career at this
Yeah.
point is coaching. When I'm in my doctor mode, the professional code of ethics is we don't self-disclose, and there's very, very good reasons for that. But as a coach, I think it's important to be able to share life experiences.
Yeah.
And what I bring to the table, I've got over 20 years working as a psychiatrist. I've worked as a medical director of inpatient units. I've had over 20 years and continue to work at Saratoga County Alcohol and Substance Abuse as the medical director there.
Wow.
So I've got my medical experience and my knowledge of humans with my psychiatry and illnesses. Um, I'm an entrepreneur in coaching, but just like you and just like so many people, I've also had my problems with addiction. I haven't had a drink in over 20 years. I have had problems with depression, and my life really took a turn 12 years ago when I was suffering from just like terrible burnout.
I'm curious about one thing, and that is, are you an MD and a PhD also?
No. So I wasn't under. I only did the MD part. So I'm a medical doctor with a specialty in psychiatry.
I did not. I didn't. I guess I didn't realize. I thought that psychiatrists were all PhDs. I did not realize that.
That's
Wow.
really, yeah. So that's common. That's a common. So the lay of the land within mental health.
Yeah.
So the psychiatrist and the psychologist. So the psychologists are doctors through the PhD program.
Yeah.
And then the psychiatrists come into it from the medical side of things.
Yeah.
Um, and just kind of in generalities, what the field has evolved into is that the psychiatrists are mainly the ones who are doing medication management and less of the therapy, which is one of the reasons that I love coaching. And the therapists, the psychologists, are doing more of the psychotherapy.
I used to sell for a bathroom remodeling company years ago, and I remember I went on this sales call and it was a psychiatrist, and I'm standing in his bathroom and I gave him the price and he goes, okay, now give me your best price, and I said, I just did. And he said, no, you didn't. I said, yes, yes, I did. And he goes, you're lying. I said, I'm not lying, and I don't appreciate you calling me a liar. And he said, it's okay. Everybody lies. We have to. It's a built-in mechanism. Otherwise, you'd go stark raving mad if you told yourself the truth about everything. I'm like, dude, stop analyzing me now. Like, what is, but so I find the entire field of psychiatry, I obviously being in recovery myself, I've always loved the how the mind works, the human mind. I love studying that. So do you get into any of the like quantum fields? Do you do any of that stuff in your journey?
So help me understand the quantum fields. Are you referencing things like the law of attraction, or what is it that you're
Dr.
kind of?
Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Okay, yeah.
You know who Joe is.
Mhm.
And then I have a guy, Dr. Jeffrey Fannin. He traveled the world with Dr. Dispenza. He's a friend of mine, and
Yeah.
he's been on the show. And I think that's more PhD stuff. But he talks a lot about the quantum fields and quantum physics, and I don't know if that's related to what you do or not.
So not exactly so within the field of psychiatry, the profession and in medicine in general, it's very much kind of quote unquote evidence based.
Yeah.
So we got to have the science, we got to point to the science, and in some ways that's very good. You don't want your medical doctor to be a cowboy, like let's try this. You want some kind of thoughtful evidence approaches to it. On the other hand, there's alternative ways of looking at the world in terms of the mind, body, and spirit,
Yeah.
that we close ourselves off to as a field, because it's much harder to study those things.
Sure.
So within my field, I stay within the psychiatric professional code and the standards of care. My personal life, I think that the world is a place full of wonder and awe, and I think that we have not scratched the surface of really kind of completely understanding it. And I am completely open to learning and to changing my points of view and to just kind of have that beginner's mind. It's one of the things I love, really. It's to have my mind changed and to learn. That's one of the keys for me for happiness.
Yeah. So when you went through, you got your MD, where did you immediately open your own practice? Did you work somewhere? How did things flow from there for you?
As I was finishing my residency, I had gone to medical school and did my residency in Richmond, Virginia, at the Medical College of Virginia.
Okay.
And I had a lot of opportunities. I was fortunate to have a lot of things I could pick from. So there were practices in Richmond that were available to me. The Department of Psychiatry at the medical college had shown an interest in hiring me. One one of the traps I ended up in, and like it has been uh, a lesson that I've had to learn and unlearn and relearn. In medical school, I got engaged and I got married. And when I went into my residency, I went in married and starting a family. And as a resident, you're not making that much money. You make some, but all my friends and my family who were not in medical school had started to advance their lives. They were doing things like buying houses.
Yeah.
And we were in an apartment. And within a couple of years of working as a resident, you get your medical license. So you don't just have the MD. Now you have a license so you can actually practice medicine. So I started to do a lot of moonlighting. There were state hospitals uh, within an hour of Richmond, Virginia. And so I would drive south to Petersburg, Virginia, and I would drive west to Williamsburg, Virginia. And there were two state hospitals that were always looking for overnight coverage for their large wards. And I started to work a lot of hours, like a lot of hours. And you know, my wife at the time and I were able to buy a house and, you know, kind of keep up with the Joneses um, at the expense of sleep and other things. And I was having a blast. It was fun. I was learning a lot. Uh, but when I finished my residency, I was going to have to take a pay cut and like to do some other opportunity. So I was really kind of looking to work less and ideally make more. Um, and my wife and I, we at the time we made a decision that we were going to take an opportunity to come up to New York,
Mm.
and I accepted a position working at an inpatient hospital setting in Poughkeepsie, New York. And my thought process was that I really wanted to see how medicine and psychiatry was practiced in other parts of the United States. A lot of the practices when Richmond, the psychiatrists that were working there, many of them had graduated and had been influenced by, you know, the Medical College of Virginia, which was a great education. But I thought, you know, if there's an opportunity to learn how other people have been trained and think and, you know, what they do, it'd be nice to move somewhere else. And I left with a plan, kind of a framework for how I envision the next couple of years going. Um, I wanted to work on an inpatient setting because I wanted to get really good at my craft. And being on an inpatient setting is where people come in the most dire need of help and assistance. This is where people are suicidal. There's people who are having, you know, manic episodes and psychotic episodes. But that's really the area where I thought I could learn the most, the fastest. And then I thought I would start a private practice, you know, maybe in 5 years or so. It took longer than 5 years, but I eventually did that. And then I said, you know, down the road, I'd really like to do something else. I'm not sure what that's going to be, but, you know, I just kind of penciled in without really putting much thought into like what that would be. But there was the three phases that I kind of thought about in general when I started my practice. So I left my residency. Like that was a long story. I left my residency to move to Poughkeepsie and start working on an inpatient unit there.
And when is this like the like were you called to the ER for episodic patients that were, I mean, was it that kind of situation? Like, oh God, let's get our resident psychiatrist down here.
No, so I mean, in residency, that's what we did. We covered the ER and the inpatient units, and you know, we were covering everything. Once I graduated, there was a team in place. So when I was on call after I had graduated and now had a employed position as a psychiatrist, there would be a team that would do evaluations in the emergency room for you. Occasionally, you might be called in to see someone that was a little bit more complex and you needed to lay eyes on them. But by and large, you would take call every 5 to 7 nights. You would take call over the phone. Occasionally having to go into the hospital, but that wasn't the norm. Mainly was from home. You may not get much sleep. There may be calls all night long, but you didn't have to go in anymore.
Right. So, so you moved to, what's it called? Poughkeepsie?
Poughkeepsie, New York.
Yeah. I've heard of it.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you were still fairly young and newly married, like 30-ish, maybe.
Yeah, so I think I was 31, 32, something like that around that time. Yeah, and we were recently married. I had a son who was 4 and turned 5 shortly after I had graduated. Yeah.
Wow. So where did you said that you had a 5-year plan to start your own practice? It took 5.5 years.
It took longer than that. I mean, life has a way of kind of throwing you curveballs, and you're ready for them or you're not. And I wasn't ready for all the curveballs that came my way. In my decision making. So even though I'm the one helping people and helping them with life and life choices and judgment and stuff like that, you can't cut your own hair. And I had really had problems with alcohol. Going back to the first time I drank, right? And then in college and med school and, newly married. And I actually had a period of time in my medical school where I was overextended and had to take a year off. And I attributed it, when I had to explain myself to the various people at school. This is a story I've never told, by the way, Ken. But I had to take a year off, and I was working as a waiter. I was partying, and I was trying to go to med school, and like all 3 things couldn't fit. And med school was suffering. So I talked to the administration of the school, said that I have a drinking problem. I need to stop drinking and get myself straightened out. Wow. And I stopped drinking for some years. It was not in my mind, at that point, like anyone who's been in recovery, you either like get that idea that you've got a problem embedded, or there's reservations, right? So I had a lot of reservations whether this was a problem or not. This was an excuse, right? I messed up.
I love the transparency, Manuel. You're a psychiatrist. You're studying it, and yet you're still in denial. So it's anybody's susceptible to it.
Anybody. So at that point, I was just a medical student, but and I had an excuse. I messed up because I think I've been drinking, and the truth was I was just making bad decisions, and when you have an alcohol problem, part of it is losing control and making bad choices. Like, I should be studying, but I'm going to have 1 beer, and guess what? 1 turns into 5. But I took a year off, and I did stop drinking, and I stopped drinking until I finished my residency. So that was about 5 years. But in my mind, the drinking was not the problem. I had just been dumb. I had gotten overextended. I wasn't focusing enough. When I finished my residency, I said, I think I can drink safely now. And I did drink, but not safely. It kind of reared its head again. And, within a couple of years of having started to work in Poughkeepsie, the drinking was becoming a problem again. Been fortunate it never affected me professionally. But it certainly caused problems in my judgment and in my family. I got divorced and ended up moving from Poughkeepsie, where I was working inpatient, to Saratoga, which was a couple of hours away, Saratoga Springs, New York. where I took another position working inpatient. And I worked inpatient there for probably 5 years, 6 years. So all told, it was closer to 7 to 8 years of inpatient that I ended up doing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think I mean you're taking me back to 20 years ago when I was in a hospital for a 28-day treatment. And it was I mean, there were psychiatrists involved in the it was pretty insane. And to see some of the people, and I'm sure you've seen this. I mean, I had a friend that I made in there that was the director of for a hospital. He was the director of the recovery department, whatever it was called, in this hospital, a big giant hospital, very well known. And he ended up getting kicked out of treatment for, like, they kicked him out, like, because the denial is so strong. And it seems like I've seen a lot of people, and I'm sure you have, that the more educated they are, sometimes it's even more difficult to get them to admit that, hey, there's an issue here. And I experienced that myself personally. I went through that denial.
So you can justify and rationalize just about anything, right? So yeah, when I finally hit a bottom with the drinking, 21 years ago, the realization, and my second wife, sat me down. She said, "Look, you've got to stop drinking, or you got to leave." And I looked at her like I had many times and said, "Look, it's not the drinking. I'm stressed out, the job, the this, the that." And we'd gone through this before, and I could usually just kind of, and this time she just wouldn't look at me, and she just, said 2 or 3 times, "You got to stop drinking, or you got to leave." So I got mad, right? Said, "Okay, I'll stop drinking. Like, no big deal. If you think it's a big deal, I'll stop drinking." And I stopped drinking for like 2 days. And then I snuck a beer, and I was like so proud of myself. Like, I stopped for 2 days, and I'm going to just like sneak a beer. And somewhere in the middle of that beer, like, my higher power, like, kicked me in the head and said, "You are crazy. Like you just said that you don't have a problem, and that you're going to stop, and you're sneaking a beer, and you're proud of yourself. Like, what is wrong with you?" And that was really not because I was smart, but something inside me said I was delusional, right? To have that level of an ability to justify and rationalize, and that scared me. That's the first time. I mean, I had problems where I'm going to stop, and then I didn't stop. I'm not going to drink today, and I drank today. But that moment just absolutely terrified me, because I said I'm not in control at all of what my brain is thinking and what it's doing, and this is a big problem. And that's when I really like embraced recovery and started going to the meetings and whatnot. Yeah.
I can remember my ex could, and we lived in a big house, and she could be in bed asleep and hear a beer can open and come down the stairs. What do you do? But so I'm sitting here thinking, like, I remember I would take a can of beer, I would cover it with a towel, and just it'd take me 5 minutes to open the thing so she wouldn't hear it. Like, just and that's what people don't understand, the insidiousness of the disease, the insanity of it. And I get it, man. I can, oh my gosh, I can relate to that. So, like, my ex saying the same thing to me, and I'm going, "You're the reason I drink so much."
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. So, well, congratulations on your recovery. That's amazing. And so you got into you finally surrendered, is what I refer to it as. and you got into recovery. And so how did things go from that point forward for you?
I embraced the recovery. I initially was too embarrassed and scared to go to AA meetings locally.
Yeah.
So I was driving, I'm in Saratoga. Albany is about 30 miles south. I would go down to Albany to go to meetings there 3-5 times a week. And there was construction going on. It would take, I already had long days, but I was going and coming back. I started individual psychotherapy. I started group psychotherapy in a recovery group. And I remember one day in group saying, I can't do this driving anymore. It's just there's no time for anything else but work and driving and meetings, and I'm not going to really give up my meetings. But I'm worried about going to meetings here locally because like a large percentage of patients that I was treating were in recovery, and
Yeah.
I was like just absolutely scared to show my face.
Yeah.
My anonymity and what are they going to think, and all this ego stuff, right?
Yeah.
And one of the members in the group, I'll never forget, he said, I think this is where you got to put all your chips into the middle of the table and say, do you trust the process or do you not trust the process? I said, I don't have any choice but to trust the process because my way is not working.
Right.
And I went to my first AA meeting locally, and it was like the hardest, 50 yards to walk from my
Yeah.
car into the door. I was ready to say, forget recovery. I'm going to go to Florida and just drink. Like I was just petrified. Could barely get my head in the door. But I was met with love and compassion and understanding and zero judgment. Glad you're here, Doc. It's all good. And as far as I know, no one ever broke anonymity, and it was just amazing experience.
Yeah, it's magical. It truly is. I I did I was the CEO of a company, had the big house, 2 Mercedes, and I went to my first AA meeting. I'll never forget. I drove like 30, 40 miles out of town because God forbid anybody see me walking into I can so relate to that. And I sat down right next to a doctor that I knew. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing here? And he goes, oh, I've been sitting here waiting on you to get here. So it's funny that we are so like the denial is insane. So I'm
One of the first AA meeting that I went to, there was another psychiatrist at that meeting, and I didn't know him and he didn't really know me, and I did a very brief introduction when I walked in. And as the meeting finished, he came up to me and he said, nice to meet you, glad you're here. And he said, you don't have to be alone anymore. And that's part of, so there's little pearls out there that I've kind of consolidated, but I know how much that meant to me to hear that at that moment. It was just, a message from God.
It's amazing, man. It's amazing. So along the way, I'm always curious to know, people have, I truly believe that people were born with a purpose. Everybody is. And a lot of, I can remember as a kid being told, stop dreaming so much. That's a pipeline dream. Get down out of the clouds and into reality. And so I think unintentionally, maybe intentionally, I don't know, but unintentionally, the adults around us as children have a tendency of squashing our dreams, and then people get stuck. They don't ever pursue what their real purpose is in life. And what do you think that is? Is it fear? That's the number one answer people give me, is they think that fear holds people back. But what do you think it is?
I think it's, fear, but the way that I look at it is that there's a path that others before us have blazed, and that well-worn path promises safety and security. Like, follow this path, do the following things, and you're going to be okay. And what we're not given permission to do is to blaze our own trails. And I imagine if you look back at 70,000 years ago, hunter-gatherers, you followed the path. This is how we, catch mastodons or whatever, right? This is where they are. This is the path we follow. This is how we do it. And every once in a while, there's got to be some innovation that happens. Someone says, I'm not going to follow your path. I'm not going to follow the well-worn path.
Right.
And the permission to do that. So, part of like my journey, what I like to talk about now and talk about with folks like you and people listening, is the pathways to happiness. And so I said, learning and growing. We're never finished products. That's one of my jams for happiness. Another of the pillars for happiness is you got to blaze your own trail. Life by default is what most of us have had access to, and then life by comparison. Like, what do other successful people do? How do they grow? What do they want? What do they acquire? Like, what's the size of their house, their bank account?
Yeah.
But at some point, having that internal compass that tells you, this is who I am, and this is what I want, and this is what I'm good at, and my basic needs have been met. Like, what do we do once our basic needs are met? Is, now we have a chance to start to think about things like, blazing your own trail. Figuring out who you are, what you want, what you're good at, and what is the contribution that you want to make to the planet.
I love that. I've always been a blazer of my own trail. I just can't conform. I don't. It's something in me. In 2020, we were as a world faced with some unbelievable challenges. And a friend of mine runs for the state of Ohio, runs the suicide prevention hotline, which is a state-run organization. And he reached out to me to talk about some marketing ideas to get their message out more, to get people to call them. And we were talking, and man, the suicide rates have went I don't know what they are today, but I know at the time, mid 2020, they were skyrocketing. And if somebody reaching out to you and they've lost all hope, and they're at the end of their rope, they don't know which way to go. I mean, what do you say to, and I'm sure it varies, but what do you say to somebody that may be listening or watching, that they're at the end of their rope? They don't know which way to go. They feel like life is over. And my dear friend and client, Dr. Laura, I call her. I call her doctor. She's a nurse practitioner, and she works with primarily geriatric patients. Only that's her business. But what do you say to somebody that's lost all hope? Like, how do you bring them back?
I mean, it really is kind of case by case, but the most important thing becomes to establish some element of rapport. You gotta meet them where they're at, and be willing to listen without judging, and with kind of compassion and understanding. And somewhere in there, the desire is that you give them at least a little bit of that there is hope. things can change. Change is possible. You're not alone. You're not the first person that's been here. And you know, if you kind of turn away from the cliff that you're about to jump off of, and you give things a chance, there's every possibility that things can change for you. But we can't do that while you're staring at the abyss.
Yeah.
And that compassion, understanding, and meeting them where they're at, establishing that rapport is important.
Yeah. So have you written any books?
I've got 3 books inside me that at some point will get written.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what's on the horizon for you? I mean, you've been a doctor. I had no idea that an MD could be a psychiatrist. So
Yeah.
I learned something new today.
Yeah.
So you've been a psychiatrist, MD. You have 21 years in recovery. You have sounds like just an amazing um, grounding and footing in life. What's on the horizon for you?
Well, I'm going to take you back like 12 years ago, real quickly.
Yeah.
So I'd had, alcoholism, and then after that, I had depression, and I had treatment and therapy and all sorts of things. But 12 years ago, I hit another bottom. It was September 2008. And I was completely burnt out. I was emotionally exhausted. I was like so cynical in my attitude, and I no longer felt effective. And my life was like a treadmill. There was like no end to it. And from the outside, everything looked like I had a successful practice. Everything was good. But I was so miserable. And the month before, August 2008, Magdalena, my twin sister, had passed away after a battle with a brain cancer. And it was striking to me, literally one day, staring at a picture of her as the sun was going down. It was dark in the room, and her picture, she's just beaming. And that's how she lived her life at the end. She was so gracious and so happy, and so glad for what she had. And really, I'd ask her, "How are you doing?" And she'd say, "It's not so bad. I have my kids. I get to stay home with them now, and my family visits me all the time, and my friends visit. It's not so bad. I've got it okay." And there I was, healthy with a successful practice, and burnt out. And that was a moment where I do this line in the sand, and I said, I'm going to commit to enjoying the ride no matter what. And over the last 12 years, I've had this long runway where I've committed to learning and growing and seeking out happiness and searching for happiness and wanting to give back. A much bigger future that opened for me was really, I want to have a bigger impact on the world.
Mm.
And how am I going to do that? And who am I? So I studied marketing, and I had virtual mentors, podcasts and shows like this, where I learned and I was inspired. And after 12 years, I have a coaching practice now where I coach entrepreneurs who have been successful, but who are experiencing the other side of success. So when you work so hard to be successful, we get dinged up by the world. So folks who are having, their own struggles themselves personally or in their family with traumas, addictions, depression, anxieties, my coaching is to help those people. And then I get to do podcasts and interviews like this, where I elevate that conversation. I don't want depression, trauma, anxieties, addictions to be cast in a light that we don't look at. We need to elevate and highlight that. We need to be decreasing the stigma by putting on my coaching hat and talking about this stuff that's personal and relevant and can save lives. Like when I turned into a psychiatrist, I couldn't save lives the way that other people did in medicine. This is how we save lives. We talk about the truth, and that change is possible. There's hope, and you don't have to be alone.
I I love that. That's what I live my life for. I love that. Laura says, "Isn't it ironic? Psychiatry and ER doctors have the highest suicide rates themselves." She says, "Thanks for giving so much of yourself." And then she asks a great question: "What do you do for self care? Do you have a
So great.
psychiatrist?"
So I currently do not have a psychiatrist, but I do a lot for my self care. My life looks very much the same, like the hours that I work, and the commitments that I've made. I built in an exercise practice that I stick to. I meditate. I change my eating habits. I focus on my sleep. I've got to get a certain amount of sleep, and then you know including things that I love doing every single day that I highlight. Like we look for things that we enjoy to come in and neon, right? But things like this, having a conversation with you, Ken, this is a highlight for me for my day. I get to count this as, my 10% of the day that I'm like just having a blast and enjoying myself. So finding those things don't have to be a lot. And it doesn't have to be neon. It's just a highlight and intentional doing things that you enjoy um, every single day. And then my commitment to, you know, growing my coaching practice and elevating the message, getting better at speaking so that people can listen and I can get on platforms where, we can spread a message that saves lives.
I I love it, man. I love it. Billy Merritt, who's a good buddy of mine and a client, wants you on his show. Just say yes. He's a good dude. You'll love him.
Billy, it would be an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, Billy's a good dude. So you for anyone listening or watching right now that I'll tell you I'll ask the question by telling you a very quick story. I had my wife and I had just opened our first office. This was many years ago. And I had one of my employees, new employees, big guy, comes walking in my office and he goes, boss, there's a dude out in the parking lot looking in the windows of your SUV. And I'm like, well, tell him to get the hell out of here. Why are you telling me? And you're bigger than I am. And he goes, well, I would, but he has it blocked with his tow truck. He was there to repossess my car. And I was like, oh, and had been sober for a while, and I'm like, oh, life just got really, really, really bad. I really felt like I had hit an emotional bottom. And I can remember at that moment, like I was out of hope. And I had been to 1,000 AA meetings, but I had no hope in that moment. And I think that people get to those moments in life that feel like there's no hope in sight. Is there anything you can say to somebody that may be going through I mean, financial struggles are real, and people go through them, and I believe, I mean, financial problems are one of the top causes of divorce. And so what do you say to somebody that might be going through something like that and they don't have the hope? How do you bring them hope in this moment right now?
Assuming you've got a direct connection, right? You have the opportunity to talk. Again, it's all about the relationship. Our connections with people are the places that can bring us back. So if it's someone I don't know, the very first thing is to establish rapport however I can. Tell me your story. What's going on, what has happened, and then we go from there. I remember as a resident, so I in Richmond. Richmond's on I-95, and we had a teaching hospital that had so much trauma and so much traffic. It was a very, very busy ER. And we would be called, 3, 5, 6 times a night to admit someone who was depressed and suicidal or had overdosed. And, the ER was dealing with, terrible accidents, and they were just mad at patients who had intentionally overdosed. And the patients were mad that, life had gone the way that it had for them. And we would be called in when we were tired and underslept and overworked to work up and admit another person. And they would be combative and unpleasant to deal with.
Yeah.
And the go-to strategy that I discovered was, it was never about, what happened that brought you to the point that you wanted to die. It was always about, tell me about your childhood. Let's start by me remembering you as a child, you remembering what happened. And if I could get someone to open up a little bit of their life, and I could get a little bit of, human compassion going for, the child that had grown up with the traumas and the stuff
Yeah.
that is hard to imagine, I could put up with whatever they were, and they could then get some sense of safety and an ability to kind of back off the combativeness, and let's work together to find out what we're going to do to get you better.
So it's really just getting them to open up and start talking and
It's connection,
yeah,
right? Connection, human connection. So that's my third pillar of happiness, right? So we got learning and growing. We never finish products. We got blaze your own trail. We have connection. And then we finish off with, commit to enjoying the ride no matter what.
Wow. I love that, man. I love that. Dr. Manuel Astruc. Did I say it all right?
Be perfect. Great.
So where, if anybody wanted to follow you on social media, where are you active on social media, and where?
Yeah, I am. So every morning on Facebook, I do a Facebook Live. I do a 3-minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes before I start seeing patients. So it's under Manuel Astruc Coaching on Facebook. And I talk all things happiness, success, leadership, and just a little, moment of morning musing for myself and for people who want to connect with me.
That's so awesome. Is
Yeah.
there a website address?
Yep. Website is manuelastruc.com.
I'm
Got all my contact information there.
I'm gonna pop that up on the screen. So ManuelAstruc.com.
Exactly.
There it is. Scrolling across the bottom. Awesome. Everybody watching right now needs to go. I wish you had a book I could tell everybody to go buy.
So I'll ping you when I get it written. I need to find some white space. I'm transitioning from my medical practice to more of the coaching, but yeah, there's a couple of books that will be coming out.
You should. Did you ever see the movie What About Bob?
Yeah. One of my favorite movies. Yeah, it was great. Yeah.
Mine too. I write a book called Baby Steps.
Yeah, baby steps. Yeah,
it's so funny. But I know I love your energy, and I really I've enjoyed talking with you and having you on the show. You just have a very calm energy, and I really like that.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I've never done a show like this, and it was a blast. Thank you so much for having me.
This is your first time doing a show like this?
I've done podcasts, but we never get into the thick of life, right? The messy parts of life. Never had to go in. Never chose to go into that. Yeah.
Well, this is called break through walls, not tiptoe.
That's right.
Walls.
No, I love it. I love it. It was great. It was great. Yeah.
That's people need to know that even doctors have challenges, man. We all go through it.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
Thank you so much. Don't hang up on me, but I am going to end the live stream, and then I'd like to chat with you real quick afterwards. So Manuel, thank you. Manuel. I keep wanting to say Manuel. It's not, it's Manuel. Manuel, thank you so much for being on here today and being transparent and open and sharing your heart. It's been amazing. So everybody go over to manuelastruc.com and follow him. Follow him everywhere.
Great.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much.
We'll see you guys later. Have a great day. Bye-bye.